You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
This episode of Mission Log is also brought to you by ExpressVPN. Be smart. Stop paying full price for streaming services and only getting access to a fraction of their content. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/missionlog. Don't forget to use our link at expressvpn.com/missionlog to get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 477, Basics, parts 1 and 2.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we take a look at an episode or two of Star Trek to discuss the morals, meanings, and messages and see if it stands the test of time.
This week, we say goodbye to Season 2 of Voyager with Basics Part 1. The one where you fool Janeway once, shame on her. Fool her twice, and it's probably yet another plot by Seska.
And then we say hello to Season 3 of Voyager with Basics Part 2, the one where even a little lava can't come between friends.
John will be back with trivia in a moment, right after I tell all of you how to reach us. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on Twitter and Facebook at Mission Log Pod. While you're at it, leave us a review and a rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. And please remember, your comments could be used on Mission Log or Engage on the Roddenberry YouTube channel. And now, here is John Champion with a lot of trivia.
I tried to keep it pretty slim, actually, for this two-parter, because that's actually one of the more interesting things about this episode. So we have a two-part episode written by Michael Piller. He gets the sole credit here, but we'll discuss that more in a moment. And both parts directed by Rick Colby. We're about midway through Rick's tenure on Voyager, and the last episode of his that we discussed was in the middle of Season 2 with Resistance. We will catch him again, though, through the remaining seasons. And, of course, he was simultaneously directing on DS9 during this time. And, you know, we haven't mentioned it before, really, but it was also in these early seasons that Rick was dating Kate Mulgrew for a time. And now, here's the kind of weird production stuff that was going on behind the scenes with these two episodes, actually. And this was a real rarity for Star Trek and, honestly, for TV in general at this time, that you've got a season-ending cliffhanger, two-parter, written and directed by the same team. But this one was special, again, for a few other reasons. Primarily, it was Michael Piller's last episode as an executive producer on Voyager. He would stick around as a consultant, but after this point, he was no longer a day-to-day influence on the show. He wanted to leave it with a bang, and he got most of the credit for this arc. Now, that's not to say that it was all his. Jerry Taylor, Rick Berman, and Ken Biller, among others, all had their influence. And, in fact, there are a couple of major plot points that changed because of them. We will get into that later. Another interesting point about production, we all know that TV shows aren't always shot in the order of release, and we also know that season cliffhangers are usually filmed separately with the conclusion rolling after the summer hiatus. This is a two-parter that is even more mixed up in scheduling. Part 1 was shot, then 3 other episodes intended for Season 3 were shot, then at the end of Season 2, the conclusion of Basics wrapped. That was in April of 1996 with the intention of airing in September of that year. So the 2 episodes weren't filmed concurrently, but they were all squeezed into the end of Season 2, just separated by 3 additional episodes. Wild. We do have some location shooting here, Lone Pine, California, in the Alabama Hills. Shout out to my home state. Augmented quite a bit with some mats to make the terrain look even more dangerous with lava flows, etc. And let's meet our guest stars. We have so many returning guests. Back in one of Chakotay's visions is his father, Kolopak, played again by Henry Darrow. And of course, we welcome back Martha Hackett and Anthony DeLongis as Seska and Majkala, respectively. John Geoghegan-Huber, who we saw last as Giles Surratt in 2 previous episodes, returns here, but as Tierna. Simon Billig is back as Hogan, and Nancy Hauer is back as Samantha Wildman. And finally, we get to welcome back the exceptional Brad Dourif as Lon Suter in his final 2 appearances in the role.
As a computer, I would of course prefer machine language to basic. Perhaps this story is too epic to be translated into machine language. Let's find out.
Prologue. Our old friend and Voyager's resident serial killer, Lon Suter, is still confined in his quarters, making use of his time with a newfound passion for floriculture, likely brought on by his meld with Tuvok. Among the other positive benefits of that therapy, he also confides in the Vulcan that he really wants to contribute to the crew of Voyager somehow, maybe in aeroponics? Tuvok will check it out. Meanwhile, a message comes in for Chakotay. It's Seska, holding her and the commander's baby, issuing an urgent plea for help as Majkala threatens her and her child. Act 1. Is this a trap? It's probably a trap, right? Still, Janeway and Chakotay debate the risks if he decides he needs to help, and the crew will be right behind him. To get a little extra perspective, Chakotay takes a vision quest in which he confers with the spirit of his father, and the father of the child says, "You need to be a father to your child." Whether Chakotay is willing to accept him or not, that child is his, and he is a child of their people. So Voyager sets a course to rendezvous with Seska, but only after devising some tactical advantages like decoy holographic ships to throw off the Kazon and a little backup from the Talaxians if they need it. In short order, Voyager intercepts a damaged Kazon shuttle with a badly hurt pilot. He's beamed aboard to sickbay and in his weakened state tells Chakotay that Seska is dead. Act 2. Tierna, the Kazon, says that Majkala ordered Seska's throat to be cut after he found out that she had sent a message about the baby. Tierna himself escaped only by bribing a guard, but Kala attacked his shuttle as he escaped. The baby was taken to the colony at Jima 4 to be raised as a servant. Chakotay, of course, wants to pursue with Tierna's unwilling help. This is still probably a trap, right? The EMH can offer no help in the way of a lie detector. He can only say that Tierna was legitimately hurt from the shuttle, and he has a very high red blood cell count. B'Elanna can confirm the shuttle was attacked by Kazon weapons. Tierna goes one better in trying to allay their suspicions by giving the Voyager crew a tactical look at Kala's defense net through their route. It's still dangerous, but they'll carry on. Sure enough, there's a minor attack only moments into the journey. Not bad enough to maintain a red alert, though, and that allows some time for Janeway and Tuvok to visit Suter. In his quarters, Suter is nervous but excited to make his request to the captain for supplies. He intends to turn his quarters into an aeroponics lab, and she says she'll consider it. Suter's desperation to do something for the crew of Voyager, anything, betrays him, though, and his outburst toward the captain makes them all uneasy. Act 3. Minor but frequent Kazon attacks continue, all aiming for Voyager's starboard ventral. Is it coincidence or coordinated? Each minor attack from seemingly unaffiliated Kazon starts to add up with compounding damage. And does Tierna know anything about this? Chakotay confronts him in sickbay, but Tierna isn't forthcoming with anything other than mocking him for losing his cool. Are we sure this isn't some kind of trap? Tierna is confined to quarters until the bridge crew can make sense of it. Right next door to Tierna is Suter, who's visited by Neelix with some dinner. The red alert comes back, though, and Neelix ducks out, leaving Suter in the dark, literally and figuratively. On the bridge, situation grows more tense when 8 large Kazon ships come into range in a Cardassian formation and seemingly baiting Voyager with an obvious escape route. Battle stations are called as Voyager heads right toward them. Act 4. Voyager deploys its hologram fleet, which breaks up and distracts the Kazon formation. Then the firefight begins, with more enemy vessels closing in on Voyager and the holoships, even at one point catching the EMH in the crossfire when he is accidentally projected along with the other holograms. While Voyager gets in a few good shots, even taking out one of the Kazon ships, there's trouble brewing inside on Deck 8. In his quarters, Tierna removes a toenail, revealing a tiny needle. It's a detonator. When injected into his bloodstream, turns his whole body into a bomb. His body morphs and expands, and then blows up real good, leaving a gaping hole through his room into Suiter's and taking out a main plasma conduit at the same time. You see, the whole thing was a trap. The hologrid is out, Voyager is on fire in many places, and the Kazon concentrate their attack. As a last ditch, Tom Paris escapes in a shuttle to try to meet up with those friendly Talaxians, hoping to mount a rescue. Voyager is hobbled and now being boarded by Kazon soldiers. Captain Janeway can't even pull her favorite maneuver, a self-destruct order, because ship systems are damaged so badly. The invaders make their way to the bridge, holding the crew at gunpoint. Act 5. Maj Kala enters, along with Seska holding her baby. Chakotay gets off a few choice words, and Kala announces that he's raising the child as his own. Apparently, Seska had convinced him that the pregnancy occurred while she was under Chakotay's command, and it was forced upon her. A convenient lie that stuns Chakotay. Janeway, after literally being slapped down by Kala, asked him to spare the lives of her crew. They were following her orders. But Kala has a different plan. He's going to strand the entire Voyager crew on a planet in the Hanan system. Everyone is corralled into a cargo bay, except two. There's a missing shuttle, and there was that room next to Tierna's. There's a third they also don't know about if you count the EMH. He has deactivated himself with a 12-hour recall. When Voyager arrives at Hanan 4, Kala's crew lands the vessel and evacuates all of the original crew to the surface, stripping them of all their technology, comm badges included. That puts Janeway and the others in survival mode on this arid, rocky world, similar to a several-million-year-old Earth, while the Kazon-controlled Voyager lifts off. Basics Part 2. Prologue. Survival for the stranded crew means exploring Hanan 4 to find useful resources, water, shelter, weapons. That leads Ensign Hogan to a cave entrance where he is promptly killed by a fast-moving, unseen creature far bigger than he. Act 1. Tom Paris is doing his best to evade Kazon on his way to get help. The stranded Voyager crew are doing their best to survive, which means eating grubs, making weapons, and staying away from whatever the hell killed Hogan. Meanwhile, on Voyager, Seska visits sickbay for a checkup on her baby, and the EMH plays it pretty coy about the change in command and how he can't lie about his loyalties. Wink, wink. He also drops a bomb that the baby isn't Chakotay's. Much to Seska's surprise, he is indeed half Cardassian, half Kazon, so she's got some splaining to do. When she leaves, the doctor quickly weighs his options to undo the Kazon takeover, and he is surprised to learn from the computer that there is a crewman still on board, Lon Suiter, who's been hiding in the Jeffries tubes and now makes his way to sickbay. Things aren't great on Hanan 4, but they are finding some additional food sources. Samantha Wildman's baby is having a tough time, getting sicker and weaker. Chakotay attempts and fails to start a fire, but has success only when Janeway and others donate some of their hair to use as kindling. When Neelix steps out to find more rocks, Kes follows, but in the night, she and he are quickly abducted by a fast, quiet humanoid. Act 2. Tom is still trying to get help from the Talaxians, but don't worry, he has a plan. Maybe. Back on Voyager, the EMH and Suiter have a clandestine meeting about their situation. While the Doctor is motivated to do whatever it takes to take control away from the Kazon, Suiter is reluctant, knowing that he may have to kill, and he doesn't know if he can. On Hanan 4, there are indeed other people, a primitive, seemingly aggressive group who have captured both Neelix and Kes. While Tuvok is prepared with weapons, Chakotay boldly approaches, unarmed, and softly modulates his voice. Even with the language barrier and the alien leader's attempt to trade one of their women for Kes, the three walk away only to be chased by their captors. Waiting nearby are Tuvok and a few of Voyager's crew with weapons to fend off the aliens, but before they're overpowered, Chakotay and the rest take refuge in a cave, the same cave where Hogan was killed by a very large reptilian creature. Act 3. The Kazon crew on board Voyager are dealing with a warp engine issue and other malfunctions which quickly raise suspicions about sabotage. And they would be right. That puts the EMH and Suter on the defensive, but Suter knows how to throw them off at least for a little while by using a Thoron generator to scramble any tricorder readings. Back on Hanon 4, Janeway is concerned about Samantha Wildman's baby, the increasing seismic and volcanic activity, and the missing crew. She should be. They're all huddled up in that cave with the aliens trying to smoke them out. That leaves one path right past the giant, scary, but sleeping reptile creature. But outside, Janeway and some of the others are doing their best to create a distraction and lure the aliens away, opening up the cave entrance again. It's just in time as the creature has awakened and gives chase to the trapped crew. But on the way out, Tuvok and Chakotay seal the cave entrance by loosening rocks in the ceiling with their spears. Act 4. Suter has thrown off the Kazon on Voyager for a while, long enough for Tom Paris to get some instructions through to the EMH about the other systems to disable. But when Suter emerges from a conduit in sickbay, he's badly shaken. He had to kill a Kazon who is following him, and he's having trouble dealing with the weight of his actions. The doctor will hide the body in a stasis drawer. Maj Kala, meanwhile, receives news that one of Voyager's shuttles was destroyed. Maybe. There was one crewman, but that doesn't account for the other missing crewman on Voyager. With the search slowed down due to a Thoron particle leak, hey, wait a minute. Seska recognizes that old Maquis trick. She confronts the EMH, who is evasive, but points the finger at himself in order to give Suter cover. But Seska disables Voyager's computer and destroys the EMH projector on her way out to deal with a new problem, Talaxians firing on the ship. Catching up with Janeway and her crew, Tuvok is preparing for more attacks and suggests more weapons, but Janeway says they need to find a way to peacefully coexist with the aliens if they are indeed stranded here. Things worsen, though, as Wildman's baby takes a turn for the worse, and those volcanoes keep erupting nearby. Act 5. With the EMH gone and computers locked out, Suter is lucky to find that the doctor had left him a message, relaying what needs to be done to rescue Voyager from the Kazon. Suter raises his weapon and heads to engineering. On the bridge, Kala's crew chase the attacking Talaxians into a nebula, and that's just where Tom Paris wants them, probably. Back on Hanon 4, both Voyager crew and local aliens alike are becoming victims of the environment and lava swirls in their respective paths. One alien, the woman who was presented to Chakotay earlier, gets separated from her group and stranded on a rock. Chakotay braves the lava to save her and thus forges a kind of peace with the locals. A kuchimoya, y'all. Paris, in his shuttle, starts opening fire on Voyager's phaser power couplers, and in engineering, Suter has had his moment. He opens fire on all the Kazon crew, making a path for himself to disable auxiliary weapons. It's his last act, though, as one remaining Kazon soldier musters the strength to fire his weapon and kills Suter. It was enough, though. As soon as Voyager attempts to fire on the shuttle, all systems overload, disabling the ship. It's the opening Tom needs to start beaming over a Talaxian boarding party to take control of the ship. The damage is extensive. Many Kazon crew don't make it, and while Kala and the baby survive, Seska does not. Kala gives the order to abandon ship and takes the baby with him. Tom does his best to get Voyager back, underway to rescue his stranded crewmates. He arrives just as that new peace with the aliens is growing. Their elder even helps baby Wildman back to health. But the sight of Voyager breaking through the atmosphere is welcome for Janeway and her team. Back aboard, they reactivate the EMH and hear of Suter's heroics. Tuvok memorializes his crewmate with a Vulcan prayer, and Chakotay pauses a moment to say goodbye to Seska. With the crew in command again, Voyager resumes its course to the Alpha Quadrant. The end.
In the tradition of what we do here in Mission Log, we're going to look at some of the observations, as John has done such an expert job in breaking down 2 episodes.
Count them, two
dose episodes, and probably one of the most remarkable lines I think I've heard in any of our breakdowns, John, and especially from any of yours. Akuchamoya, y'all.
It's going to be our new thing. Hey, by the way, not to spoil it, right? But the production felt emboldened by this enough that then Voyager is about to take off on a lot more 2-parters. So you and we got our work cut out for us, my brother. Well, I mean, this is yeah. We'll
have to file this away. We don't want to overstay the welcome of that line, but every once in a while it's going to make itself its appearance. So if you're playing the home game or want to make a T-shirt or a word bubble, you might want to bookmark this phrase.
There we go. All right, let's get into it. Gotta say, man, I mean, right from the top, I really appreciate that we just start out by bringing back Lon Suter. You and I talked a lot about that in the episode. Well, what happens to him? Is he just hanging out in his room? So I love that there is follow-up that counts. Interesting that we have a discussion about 2 distinct species coming together to be a new one so soon after Tuvix.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. But honestly, I do like the foreshadowing here about Suter being someone new. Like all of this about being new. What happens with new influence?
There's a lot going on. And that way that only Brad Dourif can bring, because you're never really quite certain where you land with him from scene to scene, because he's very duplicit, I think, just in his demeanor. That's why he's hired for these specific types of roles. I always thought it would have been neat, though, if it was his suggestion of isolating the orchid with the isotope to separate Tuvok and Neelix.
Oh.
So
it's funny. Wait, I wonder, because that was a long period of time that we had Tuvix on board. Like that was 3 months, I think, or
something like that.
Something like that. 9 weeks or something like that. So I wonder, did Tuvix go visit Lon Suter? And if he didn't, does Tuvok just show up and like, well, you never believe what happened to me?
Yeah. Sorry, I missed our appointment, or like 10 of them. Yeah. But
right.
I love how you repeatedly ask the question during the course of each act, well, do you think this is a trap? Because it's so obvious.
Come on.
That it's a trap. And if Seska's breathing, it's a trap.
It's a trap.
Right?
You don't even need Admiral Akbar to tell you it is.
I have pinned this because I have literally many notes. Notes on that. Yeah.
All right. Here's an interesting line. I wonder if it jumped out to you the way it did to me when Janeway says, I know I speak for the entire crew, Starfleet and Maquis alike.
Yeah.
Janeway, you have one crew.
Supposedly.
It's the crew of Voyager. All right? It's just the crew. Yeah. Yeah, we really wonder why we're still doing that. Let me just ask this, by the way, and this might be a thing that comes back. Chakotay needs to have a vision quest and ask his spirit father if it's the right or wrong thing to do to go help his infant son.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just, he already talked to Janeway about it. He's already been morally kicking this around. Now he's got to go have another conversation to figure out, okay, all right, got it.
It was interesting, though, that entire sequence, because he was really pushing hard or nervously, kind of like on the, I guess it's like, the techno peyote that brings him into the dream state.
Techno peyote. Yeah, yes.
Is that our album for today?
Yeah.
Techno peyote?
It was pretty good, yeah.
But I like how he was lit. I like how Kolopak was lit in the dream sequence. Trying to look for the positives, like in this entire sequence. But I also like this line of dialogue where Kolopak says about Chakotay's son, he knows nothing of deception. He is innocent. So there is something to be said about some of the dialogue that's been introduced here, and kind of like the moral of this, right?
That is a thematic thing throughout. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, Janeway. to the EMH. Your suggestions on any subject are always welcome.
Well then.
Famous last words. I love that. I love that. Also in that same sequence, B'Elanna says, we can't figure out how to project you into this room. Maybe, no, but yes, you can actually, B'Elanna.
Yeah.
You can. I mean, look, I know they're working on it, but they have holoprojectors. They know what those are.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
They literally described like how to project a hologram into space.
Yeah.
But not into like an 8x10 room.
Yeah. I know. And I know we'll get there. I know that we'll get there, folks. Save the emails. But the idea of projecting 3D images of ships, or may I refer you all back to the animated series with the Practical Joker, just carry along a gigantic inflatable Voyager.
That's true.
Maybe that'll solve your problem, know. Did you happen to notice, got a time code for you, 1759 tactical map, which has a different spelling of Culla. As an A, C-U-L-L-A-H on the map rather than U-H as it's usually spelled. Yeah.
Eagle Eye. Mm-hmm. Very nice. Yeah. There's an interesting, maybe improv, maybe not scene when Janeway comes in and then to Suter's room, and then he's all nervous that, she appeared. He went to go get a chair and then knocked over an entire table. And both he and Tim, or I should say that Brad and Tim, they both kind of reorganized the table and stayed in character, and so did Kate. I'm wondering if that was a mistake. And they just rolled with it.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, famously for a show like Star Trek that has no room for improvisation, that's one of those things that would have played perfectly if it was.
Yeah.
So, nicely done there. Got to point out, Neelix delivers soup in a space tureen. Glad to see that. Yeah, very, very cool. And I know that we'll get into Suter's arc in more detail later, but I feel like the scene of Neelix delivering that soup almost a little wasted. Like, you talk about his duplicitous nature, Suter's, but did it feel like just an additional, like a distraction? Like, look how creepy he is, look how unstable he is, but really, did we need it?
I see what you're saying, and I agree up to a point, but I also see that it comes right after he was kind of like dejected by Janeway, so he feels down. He's he's deflated. Like all of a sudden he was like, I just want to do something for the crew. Can't you see I want to do something for the crew? I'm telegraphing and foreshadowing for the next episode that I want to do something for the crew, but she's like, I'm leaving because you're creeping me out.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
He's like,
fair enough.
Too strong. Too soon? Tuvok's like, too soon. Gave him the finger. He's like, too much.
Too much. Yep. Get the Tuvok finger. Yep. Yeah, nobody wants that. I have to say, really nice job building the tension at the top of, in part one, in episode 1, act 4, right at the beginning of that act, when Voyager engages the Kazon fleet. Shades of Wrath of Khan, like that submarine warfare feel, and Janeway just holding that tension, wait before firing. So good. Really nicely directed.
Here's where things start to take a weird turn for me, because there's, as an audience member, I'm watching and listening to the dialogue, and then all of a sudden Chakotay's like, well, they keep firing on this one spot. And then people keep saying, they keep firing on this one spot. And then Harry's like, these things got damaged, and it's going to take, a couple hours from this one spot. And we got hit there again in that same spot. It's like you saying trap over and over again. I'm like, you guys realize that you really should be running some kind of diagnostic on this one area that these primitive tactical strategists are firing on.
It just have phasers ready and charged pointing there.
Like, why are they doing this?
Yeah. How about increased shields there?
Yeah. I'm just like, they're just a few very heavily telegraphed things that are happening in these 2 episodes.
Yeah.
I don't think they really needed to be.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. A very obvious line, Maj Kala, why is it so dark in here? Someone turn on the lights. I gotta say, there was a lot of dark setting and dark lighting in this episode when you're on Voyager, but I really like it. Marvin Rush can play with those shadows very nicely as he does there. And I love Kala's reaction. Like, if we got the Tuvok finger, now we've got the Kala hand.
Oh, my God.
Kala's reaction when he is called out by Seska for checking on what happened to the missing shuttle is like, oh, yeah, they blew it up. They destroyed it. And she's like, "Are you sure?" And he just raises the hand. It's so good.
So, John, are you saying, "Hey, Cullahand man"?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for going that far to make that outdated a reference.
I know.
That was really nicely done.
This is what I do.
Yeah.
That's why you brought me on.
Good
right?
job. Yep.
So here's a technical question and a nitpick, because it's a technical question. When Cullah takes off all the universal translators, or the comm badges that are universal translators, if they're gone, then how do the alien people, like, say, Neelix and Kes, talk to everyone else?
Oh. Wow, I didn't think about that.
Like, wouldn't they revert into their native languages without the universal translator?
You would think.
That's what I would think.
Yeah.
So, have a timestamp for you.
Cool.
So, basics, part 1. This is timestamp, 42 minutes, 51 seconds. You gotta love the Land of the Lost obligatory lizard shot from a cave.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. Very well done. Very well. And by the way, Neelix says when they get to the cave, "Yeah, it looks like a do not disturb sign." So, Neelix, why are you ordering Hogan to hang out there? Yeah. Like, I mean, it's like Sala, asks, very dangerous. You go first.
Right.
Like, no, just get out of there.
This is very dangerous right here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's usually a reason for, like, a pile of bones near a cave entrance.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens to people near the cave entrance. Except if you were Baxter. I don't know. Where was Baxter the entire time?
See, dude could have built a shelter, knocked out the monster. This episode is exactly short one Baxter.
Right? They should call it like Baxter Parts 1 and 2.
They really should, yeah.
So there's a scene where they find Hogan's remains or his uniform, and then Chakotay says, "I know it sounds grisly, but I can make solar stills with the material from this uniform. We could have water tomorrow." What about the rest of the uniforms everyone's wearing?
I know.
Right? You have, like, under tunics. Just take off a top or two.
Exactly.
You would have water stills right now.
You could do that.
Just
I know.
saying.
Yeah. I do love the Doctor's line. What am I supposed to do? Lead a revolt with the gang from Chez Sandrine? That is a great reference to the kind of internal mythology on Voyager. So very well done. I also, I'm a doctor, not a counterinsurgent. Of course,
right.
Bob gets all the great lines here. And speaking of another great line, one hologram and one sociopath may not be a match for the Kazon, but we'll have to do. Classic. Michael Piller, if that was you, bless you.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
I'm surprised somebody as smart as Seska wouldn't use, like, internal sensors to find every single person that may have possibly hidden in the crawl spaces of the ship, which is, like, the logical thing to do, right? This isn't like oh my gosh, we should, like, do this because it's an interesting writing contrivance. No, that's what you would do. You would try and find ways to get around visual scanning. But then she'd be like, but Seska's super smart.
Yeah.
She lays a lot of traps. Yeah. So why not do that until, well, obviously the plot demands it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I do kind of love the EMH and Suter watching from a monitor what's happening in engineering. So there are security cameras everywhere that you can just tap into because, sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't. By the way, why didn't the EMH use a dermal regenerator on Suter? He's there in sickbay most of the time. Like, dude, you just clean him up a little. I'm sure he'd feel better.
The doc he was trying to plan his counterinsurgency. He was busy.
He was busy.
He was busy
about Che Guevara. Yeah.
Speaking of busy, lack of being busy. So you have like the Voyager crew, like, in a dark cave with no fire. So is that what basics is about? Like, getting back to the basics of actually the basic, like, cooking and eating and doing all, like, the things from being, like, primitive and stuff?
Yeah, I'm down with that. Yeah.
All right, so they're hunting and gathering eggs and space cucumbers, right? So this reminds me of, like, you don't know if those eggs are, like, edible or poisonous or whatnot, right? So it kind of like, is Harry Kim going to be like let's see if this is going to kill us or not type of moment with this food?
He's the guinea pig, yeah.
But here's like the cringe-worthiest scene I think I've ever seen in, like, all of Voyager so far. And this doesn't even have to do with, like, the Jamaki Hightower, like, Native American stuff.
Yeah.
Chakotay says, "I'm trapped on a barren planet. We're trapped on a barren planet, and you're stuck with the only Indian in the universe who can't start a fire by rubbing two sticks together." I'm like, and you called yourself an Indian. He's never called himself an Indian.
Yeah, no.
Right?
That's
It's always been like my people or, native tribe or the rubber tree or whatever like that. But he's never called himself an actual quote unquote Indian.
No, that stands out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might want to, and Neelix, great idea about using the rocks to radiate heat because that's what you would do. I mean, Sulu should have done that in the Naked Now, the Naked Time.
Right.
And before his coffee. Do that in the daytime, Neelix. Don't do it at night when you're going to get abducted by Cro-Magnons.
See?
Right?
Exactly.
What did you think about Tuvok and his archery prowess that we've never heard of before?
Oh, I'm all for it. And in fact, that needs to be a special edition action figure.
Right?
It just does.
Shout out to one of our friends, listeners, Dom. Tuvok is better in the D with archery.
Tuvok Archer. Yep.
Speaking of Archer, Chakotay said he takes a bow and arrow off of Tuvok and he says, "This is very thoughtful of you, Tuvok, but my tribe never used bows and arrows and I've never even shot one." Again, with a strange Indian reference. But Tuvok says, "This is mine."
So that was awesome.
I taught archery science for several years at the Vulcan Institute of Defensive Arts. I didn't even know there was a Vulcan Institute of Defensive Arts. Is that like the dark arts, like Hogwarts?
I love it now. Maybe it might be. I love it now, but I want a whole spin-off novel about the whole thing. I got to take us back to the Kazon here because, man, they are so inept. Like, for laying this long game plan here, the trap that is so obviously a trap, they are so inept. It's weird that they've gotten as far as they have with, think about all the misreporting of what ships are destroyed, who is killed or captured. I mean, Cullen has zero reliable source of information, and apparently he will believe anything you tell him.
Right.
So it is incredible that they could even figure out how to get a ship into space and fly it anywhere without running it into the nearest sun.
John, are you saying that these are the Kazon cops? Yeah.
Another brilliant, outdated reference. I applaud you, good sir.
Thank you, sir.
Also, look, I'm not necessarily buying the Talaxian fleet. Like, maybe if we had built up over time that they were sworn enemies of the Kazon, that they were ready for battle, maybe then, but did you feel like it was maybe a little too Deus Ex Machina?
Yeah. They didn't really establish that a lot of that history with the Talaxians would sacrifice their own people and pool their resources because the Kazon did them dirty this entire time. Now, maybe if it was the Trabe, I would have believed that.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, boy, that would have been interesting
to
bring back the Trabe with their kind of difficult history.
Right. Yeah. And that would have led to maybe some further interesting storylines. We haven't jumped the timeline, so I don't know, but that would have been really interesting considering that Trabe leader saved Janeway from being annihilated on that planet. So, powerful scene. I mean, with all of kind of the fun that we have with, picking some of these scenes out, I really think that one of the most powerful scenes was towards the end of Basics Part 2 where Suter just collapses because he, under the weight of his own morality or lack thereof, and he doesn't know what to do. And all Picard does is just kind of put his hand on his shoulder or on his back without really saying anything. I'm like, that's just wonderful physical acting that's happening.
Yeah.
And I do like this entire conversation that was happening in Basics Part 2 with Tuvok saying we're going to have to create weapons to defend ourselves against the natives. Then Chakotay is well, wait a second, I don't believe that we need weapons. We need conversation. We need to talk to these people. And then, there's a little bit of a back and forth struggle and things happen. And then Voyager returns and then Chakotay saves, his future mate from being, burned alive by lava, showing that there's this rapport that can be made by doing things peacefully, gently, like the gentleman, quote unquote, that Chakotay is. If for anything, that scene or those scenes really did kind of return, I think, some of the discussion here to basic Star Trek.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, now that they're gone, Tuvok probably should have stuck around to do a little Vulcan mind meld, memory erasing from those indigenous people. I'm just saying, because I got a lot to deal with now that they're gone.
Tierna really has an outgoing personality. He just lights up the room and explodes onto the scene. Sorry, it's too soon again, isn't it?
We'll get back to basics. in a moment.
Hey.
I know, but first, a word from this week's sponsors, and we want to tell you about ExpressVPN.
You know, John, I love watching Netflix. I think you like watching Netflix.
Oh, sure. A
doesn't?
number of streaming services, but that's kind of the granddaddy of them all.
Well, I mean, like watching Netflix without ExpressVPN, it's like buying tickets to, well, your favorite concert or my favorite concert or maybe a Taylor Swift concert, which is also one of my favorite concerts.
Yeah, that might be one of mine, too. Yeah, the tickets are pricey, but yeah, I'm not going to turn them down.
And that's like buying those tickets, but only being able to, say, like watch the opening act.
That's just rude.
And that's it.
Yeah, that's just rude. Who wants that? Yeah. Well, I tell you what, here's why that metaphor is so apt. Because it's like you're paying for a streaming service, but you're only getting the opening act. You're only getting the tip of that proverbial iceberg, as it were. So you think about it this way. Netflix and Amazon and all these other streaming services, they all have content that is different in every country where they're aired. So, for example, Netflix by itself, it has thousands of shows, but without a VPN, you're only getting access to a fraction of that based on where you're watching. All right, so how does it work? Well, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. When you launch ExpressVPN, you get to tell Netflix or whatever other streaming service you're using where they should think that you're located. That's right. You're changing your location on your computer or your phone or your set-top streaming device to say, no, I'm no longer here. I'm actually over there. And that is what opens up all of those region-coded selections of content for you. Now, I use it I've tried out just about everything. And I have to say that one of my favorites is actually having access to BBC iPlayer. There's so much content there, historical content, cooking shows. I mean, you know me, you know that I happen to watch a lot of food-related shows. And there are a lot of good ones that I've accessed through BBC iPlayer as well as, Netflix and just about every other streaming service there is. I just open up the app, I select what country I'm watching from, and then I tap the button to connect. And before you know it, I am connected. I refresh my streamer, and there I am.
Now, there's a competitive market out there for VPNs, so why do you want to choose ExpressVPN over, say, all of these other VPNs that are out there? Well, number one, you want blazing fast speeds with your VPN. You don't want to stream with a VPN and have choppy streaming or buffered streaming or streams that get delayed. You want streaming in HD with zero buffering. That's what you want. You also want it compatible with all your devices. We don't just use one. We use many. We use phones. We use laptops. We use smart TVs. Also, that can be used with ExpressVPN. So you want to be able to find those devices, use ExpressVPN with them without any issues. They also have servers in 94 different countries. 94 different countries. A lot of countries.
That's a lot.
Right?
Yeah.
That's at least 94. And ExpressVPN also works with other streaming services like BBC iPlayer, like John mentioned before, YouTube, and so many more. So
be smart. Stop paying full price for streaming services and only getting access to a fraction of their content. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/missionlog. Don't forget to use our link at expressvpn.com/missionlog to get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. All right, Norman, there was something that I brought up in the observations, and that was Chakotay's gut-wrenching decision here about whether to go after his child and help rescue him and or Seska from Kala. There were questions about consent or lack thereof on Chakotay's responsibility, which we could see as responsibility or not responsibility. He says, how do you take a child into your heart who is forced upon you? And honestly, I was a little surprised at how much of a dilemma this was for Chakotay, the, quote, gentle man. I understand that this is a two-parter. We have to take a little bit of time to build some of the layers into the drama and the conflicts that are going on. But I really wonder if this was the kind of thing that in another version of the script would just be Chakotay saying, that's my child, and no matter what, I have to help. And I can understand, Janeway, if you don't want to risk the resources of our ship by doing that. But I would think that Chakotay would feel honor-bound to go there. He's already been there once. You know? What do you think?
There was a really interesting sequence of events that happened with when Chakotay first learned about this. I mean, they saw the buoy, they saw the message. But even he doubted for a short period of time whether or not it was a trap. Mm-hmm. Going after the child was the right thing to do, but not putting Voyager and Voyager's crew in the lives of all of these innocent crew members, his crew, at stake. I'm surprised Janeway, she kind of like deliberated on his behalf to do the right thing. I'm not saying that it's not the right thing to do to go after a child.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised that she was so, proactive about making that decision for him and saying that, no, we have to do this, even if we're going to risk like the entirety of our crew and our mission to go back home. I think it was actually really bold. And I know that Star Trek, sometimes we use Star Trek, as a way to fit what's happening in the world today in the narrative of Star Trek, whether it's from the past or the present, and obviously in current Star Trek. But this was 1996 that this was happening. And I guess the debate that he was having with Kolopak about whether or not he wants to take this child of his, whether it is or not, into his heart because of Kolopak's story about like how people, the women of his tribe or women of their culture were raped, and violated, and then they took those children into their hearts. That's very much a very significant, very important topic for today. And I do not want to say this lightly at all. I just don't have the wherewithal to speak more than what I'm going to say right now. And the point is that children born of rape or non-consent is so debated right now, just in politics and morality and ethical conversations. And I found it refreshing that a story from almost 25 years ago is having that kind of relevancy right now. And especially with the father side of the equation, not the mother side of the equation.
Yeah.
So that's, again, like I said, I don't want to take that lightly. I don't want to be glib about that. I'm just trying to make a connection between that story point and what's happening today.
No, I get what you're saying, and I think I was surprised that it was a conversation that they kept having to have in the context of the show. Mm-hmm. Because I would think that even if Chakotay had doubts, those would be very short-lived doubts. That the doubt would be more about endangering Voyager, not about his moral obligation. Because, look, this is an episode or a couple of episodes here that are full of stories of redemption. And it seems like if anybody would get it that, hey, this is an innocent and this is somebody who could grow up to be better than the circumstance that he's in now, it would be Chakotay to figure that out on his own. But so that's the Vision Quest was a little weird to me that he had to get that additional. I think it's fine to have Kolopak back and have that moment as well, but I'm surprised at what led up to it.
But can I bring up one of my biggest points of contention that discussion leads into this episode, into my parts of the discussion of this episode. So I want to quote something very specific here because, John, again, in your recap, you kept bringing this point up over and over and over again because it was so incredibly obvious, from a writing standpoint and from maybe a narrative funneling standpoint that we were supposed to see. So Chakotay says, this is earlier on, Chakotay says, do you think that it's a trap? And Janeway says, do I think Seska is capable of manipulating you and me with this? Oh, yes. So you know it's a trap. And yet you choose to do this anyway. I know that there are bigger decisions being made behind the scenes, crafting this story. But when you present something so obvious like this, even to the point where your main characters are like, yep, I know it's a trap, but we're going to risk everything and not getting back home and risking the lives of innocent crew members because this baby who may or may not be yours is in danger. Right? Okay, so I hate to use the word hate in my recaps. But I hate when people know they're walking into a trap and choose to go forward with their plan anyway because other people now are put at risk for the sheer act of defiance of doing what they're doing, knowing that it's a trap to begin with.
But is this a moment where the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many? James Kirk stole the starship, endangered his career, endangered the lives of his friends to go help the one person, even when he wasn't supposed to do that, even though he knew that he was facing the end of his career and, who knows what other punishments he was going to get. Here's a situation where you take this one innocent life, and in this particular case, by the way, I'm going to get to this in just a second, but in this particular case, believed to be Chakotay's child. He has no reason to think that he isn't. Is that worth it, particularly if he's got the backup of his captain?
I would say that there's a compromise. I think there's a middle ground that can be made here. Take a strike team. Take a strike team to go do that. I mean, shoot, Tom on his own infiltrated Seska's ship. Get a couple of really smart people and go there and just figure it out for yourself. All you need is a DNA sample or go get the baby. The thing is with Kirk doing it for Spock is that's a 30-year career. That's a lifetime of achievements that's shared between these two men. And isn't my life worth his career? Or isn't my career worth his life? This is a baby that they may or may not know is actually Chakotay's. I get it. I know people, you want to send the emails how dare you say that because it's an innocent life? I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that Janeway and Chakotay know for a fact that Seska has laid a trap for them. Chakotay knows that this may or may not be his baby because she said in previous episodes that it may have been Kulla's baby. So we know that as an audience member. So why risk everybody when you can only have to risk a few? The needs of the few, those few. Chakotay, maybe Tuvok, maybe Tom, maybe Harry. Just send a strike team in to figure it out, to see if it's real. And then if it is, then go for it. Send the canary in the coal mine, but don't send the entire miners. Right?
Yeah. I do want to bring up something very important here about changing plot points, because there are a few key things here that Michael Piller originally wrote and Jerry Taylor and Rick Berman really pushed back against. So, first of all, the baby would have not survived the episode. Originally, the way the script was written, the baby didn't make it. Yep. And here's the other really important thing. It was always intended to be Chakotay's baby until literally a couple of days before they filmed those scenes where the EMH reveals that this is part Cardassian, part Kazon. And by the way, just side note here, that's why it's a little unfair for us, for me and you as a host, to get comments from listeners saying, well, why do you believe it's Chakotay's? Okay, well, because at the time it was. This was originally written, originally intended from the introduction of that plot thread to be Chakotay's. This was literally an 11th hour decision to change it. Right?
And we can't argue what we haven't seen in the course of Mission Log's reviews.
Exactly. So, but that is one major thing. By the way, Seska would have lived in the original script, and Lon Suter would have lived in the original script.
Interesting.
Now, Now, I can say that I think that killing off Seska, I think that was the right decision. I think I would say killing off Lon Suter. I think allowing him to end his arc of redemption, also the right decision. So let's talk about that. Mm-hmm. Is Lon Suter redeemed? Let's say that he did everything that he did here in this episode, but he lived. How would the rest of the crew treat him? What would be the obligation to him? Is it easier to deal with him now because he's gone? I mean, think about it. We have this guy who is confined to quarters. All he wants to do is do something for the crew. Mm-hmm. And here's this extreme circumstance where he gets to do that thing, leave his quarters, go be the hero, do it for all the right reasons, even though it anguished him, it absolutely pained him to do what he did. Let's say he survives. The rest of the crew comes back and they go, oh, yeah, but he's still the sociopathic killer. He just needs to go back in his quarters.
Well, this goes into the tried and true action adventure movie genre of, okay, we know who you are, Dirty Dozen. We're going to let you out because you have very specific skill sets that we need. But once our goals have been achieved, we're going to put you back in because we can't let you roam like decent society, the kind of people that you are. It's kind of like the Suicide Squad. There are conditions that need to be met. for these people to be able to operate because they have a specific goal. Like Liam Neeson says in Take, I have a specific set of skills that need to be, that I can employ, in the pursuit of being able to achieve my goals to get my daughter back. Well, once Suitor's done, once Suitor takes the ship back, after the doctor kind of pushes him to re-embrace those specific skills, what does that do to Suitor? Right? Maybe because that's the thing. Suitor was on his way to redemption. Can he survive? Can he? Right? Yeah, because he's good at what he does. And now with Tuvok's mental discipline, maybe he can compartmentalize those sociopathic tendencies even further. Right? So now he's a very well-disciplined, very mentally organized sociopath. So
is that still the guy that you want next to you at work?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the methods of survival here, because I thought that was another interesting thread in this episode. So we have many different players to connect the dots here. You have the violent confrontation. We have Tuvok. Well, we have Tuvok just ready to build and aim weapons because that is the logical thing to do. And it's the first thing that he sees to do, which is interesting. And I wonder if this is just making a distinction with Tuvok versus other Vulcans that we've encountered in Star Trek. The peaceful, meditating Spock sitting in his room quietly and every now and then using a Vulcan nerve pinch. But here's Tuvok, who we say in this went to that defense academy I love, and ready to make weapons, right? And here's Tuvok seeing the anguish that Suitor goes through, and we as the audience get to see the anguish that Suitor goes through, even contemplating a violent action. All right? And then we see survival through cooperation. And that's Chakotay, the gentle man again, who says, no, here's how we need to approach the situation. And I think with Janeway, we have a little bit of a balance of both. They arrive at Hanon 4, and she's the one who agrees, we need survival. We need weapons. We need this. But then she's the one who says, no, I think a little bit less of that to Tuvok is okay. And then we had the EMH telling Suitor, if Lieutenant Tuvok were here, I know he would tell you that there are times when violence is required to defend yourself, to defend your ship, to defend your crew. And you contrast that with what's going on with Tuvok's approach on the planet, honestly being the wrong choice in contrast to Chakotay. And I kind of have to respect the story in handling that, okay, these can both be the right choice, based on the circumstance, based on the environment that has brought you to those decisions.
We don't know. We don't know if it's necessarily the wrong choice. In contrast to Chakotay, it's just that the narrative, it kind of absolves any other choice aside from Chakotay's being kind of the wrong one versus the right one. Tuvok is just being prepared. There's nothing wrong with being prepared. It's not like he's creating arrows and let's go create a hunting party and wipe out these Cro-Magnon species from this planet so that we can retain dominance. He's just I'm being practical because that's what I do. I'm Starfleet security and I'm tactical. So I'm going to create a defensible position. Not an offensible position, a defensible position. But Chakotay is let's talk first. I'm okay, that's great. This is Star Trek, right? This is kind of like going back to a private little war, right? Where either you arm and continue the arms race with people, either yourselves or your enemies now become your allies, or you talk it out. You compromise and try and find a solution peacefully, right? Now, the contrivance of the end of this episode is that Chakotay saves the person that he was, the primitive that he was supposed to be betrothed to, which creates an alliance between them. And you saw that furthered on with Samantha Wildman's daughter, getting the medicine from the chief. All that. That's great. But, let's take a look at it from a non-narrative standpoint. What if that didn't happen? What if they said, hey, you know what? The Starfleet crew is a threat to who we are and our lifestyle. We're going to attack. So if Tuvok isn't prepared, what happens? It's his job. That's literally his job.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's wonderful to see them both at odds, but it's nice in the Star Trek vernacular to be able to see that, communication and a peaceful negotiation wins the day.
Got Kazons clogging up your whole ship? Call Roto Suitor and clear them out in a jiffy. That one was also too soon, wasn't it?
Well, we've basically reached the end. There's only one thing left to do with our two-parter about basics, and that is to see if the whole thing holds up and see if we learned anything from our rewatch. So, Norman, in the tradition, I'll ask you here to go first and tell us, does the episode hold up for you?
Does it telegraph what I'm going to say when I ask our audience to take a deep breath before I say what I'm going to say?
I've
already said it, so.
It might. They already know what's coming.
Deep breath.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm going to try and be constructively critical and positive and at the same time, because I do think that there are some things that are worthy about talking about in these episodes. But I think that Basics 1 and 2 essentially could have been like a really tight single episode, focusing more on, say, like Lon Suitor, and tying up like the loose ends with the Kazon storyline. But there's just so much fat and padding in these two episodes, and for me, it kind of like dilutes both episodes from the really good concentrated story that I think they could have told, and not for really any good reason. There's a lot of that filler is just filler, and I think it's maybe because they had the mandate of season finale, season opener, because that's what these two episodes are. Yeah, I mean, it's nice, it's fun to see and learn about like some of the details with the crew, like. Obviously, it's awesome that Tuvok is a master archer, and he practiced and studied archery science at the Vulcan Defense Academy of the Dark Arts, which was awesome.
Yeah, he did.
Torres being a decathlete, and Ayala too, because that's pretty much like the only detail from like Lieutenant Ayala that we've learned. These are great scenes, sure, but they're padding, right? You're not really going to change like the narrative if you don't learn about these particular skill sets. So I think that, again, if you really wanted to focus in a very like singular and very entertaining and engaging story, you can cut a lot of this padding out. I'm glad that this entire Kazon storyline is done. And I can't be a hypocrite about this. I really wanted the Kazon to work. I thought they were interesting at first. I thought that at the very beginning, they weren't like reduced down to like these kind of like tropish reactions, like, Seska forcing Cullen into all of these eye-rolling misogynistic behavioral traits, right? Yeah. I think that up until this episode, I think that Cullen actually had a lot of incredible layers to him. I thought he was interesting to watch, and all of a sudden he's just kind of like the handcuffed or the ball and chained male in this relationship, which was too bad, because I think that Anthony DeLongis, who I love, and he's a personal friend of mine, I thought he brought a really interesting look to Cullen. And Martha Hackett, I can't like sing enough praises for her originally as Seska. But now, again, both of them have been reduced to kind of like these very tropish, like Boris Badenov and Natasha type of archetypes, where they're just doing the schemes, but they're so obvious that I can't believe that our intelligence and sophisticated Starfleet crew is actually falling for these schemes. So I'm glad that that's being kind of phased out. And you can tell that these storylines are being phased out. There is a very clear and present cleaving and housekeeping that's going on here. But in the tradition of what we do, John, like, does this episode or these two episodes withstand the test of time? I have to begrudgingly say yes, because they're not two specific episodes or 2 hours worth of Star Trek entertainment that don't matter. Of course, they do matter. They just don't really feel worthy, like, of some of the better two-parters that we've seen, like in the course of Star Trek history. Best of Both Worlds probably being the highest watermark of those. And we don't know what's going to come, because we still have, I think, several other two-parters that are going to be in the future for us. But I think that overall, there are great moments in this two-part episode that could have been boiled down into one great episode. But there are really good moments that you can discuss that I think are the saving throw, that allows to have this conversation still. I wouldn't dismiss them, and I wouldn't not recommend them. I just don't really place them highly in the scope of a season finale and a season premiere.
Okay. I think I'm going to be similar to you, but a little bit different. I mean, look, I'm glad to be done with the Seska story, and I assume we're done with the Kazon too. I get the need to have some sort of internal story consistency, and they thought in creating Voyager, well, we need to have a big bad that can follow us across multiple episodes. So from a storytelling point of view, I get the impulse to do that. So it's not just Planet of the Week every week, and then you really are making Next Gen. But I feel like that attempt is kind of half-baked, and it went down a path that felt weird. It felt very much like a soap opera, and I think that's what you're hitting on when you talk about the changes in the Kazon character in general, and Kala specifically, and then Seska, who we met and who she became later on in their interactions. Contrast that, say, with Deep Space Nine, where there are definitely some soap opera elements on the station itself and with characters that we spent a long time with, but the conflicts and the big bad felt much more complex, more political, and felt like they had much more gravitas. And that's, hats off to them for being able to develop that over multiple seasons and really make those layers pay off by the end. Here it's like they started with the layers, they started with some ideas, but they couldn't quite hang their hats on where they should go with the Kazon or Seska. And then you're just kind of saddled with these characters, all right, we have to be done with them. And that's what we're seeing here. Like you said, it's like we're definitely drawing the line in where we're done with these characters. Now, does it hold up from a production point of view? It's a little bit of a mixed bag, because I think there's a lot to like about these two episodes when it comes to the ambition behind them. We've got a lot of space battle sequences. I really love, like I said, that cinematography on Voyager itself. When we're getting into those battles, I think it looks great. I love location shooting. I like the idea. I think we've had more extras, more Voyager crew people than we've ever seen before.
That was nice to see. I got to admit, that was very cool.
Yeah. Like, we rarely get that much, But at the same time, it is just through no fault of its own kind of dated. Those shots of Voyager coming in for a landing on a planet, they're always a little bit janky. The creature, the CGI, also a little janky. The shots of compositing the lava flows on our, Alabama hills and the Angeles National Forest, it's not quite right. It doesn't quite line up, and those things can take you out of it from a modern point of view looking back at this episode. I will say that on a rewatch, on a couple of rewatches for what we do here, first time around I just thought, like, this is taking too long. I want to can we get to the end here? Couple of rewatches later, and I appreciated the things that I liked about this more than I thought I would. It felt early on like, we're spending entirely too much time on Hanon 4. We're spending entirely too much time with these indigenous people with the bad makeup. Yeah. But when I went back for the repeat viewings, I was much more keyed into the Doctor, to Lon Suter, to Tuvok and Chakotay when they're at their best, to Janeway as a leader. Like, these are the things that stood out to me. So I think it does hold up as a slice of the larger Voyager mythos. It stands up as a way to look at these characters. We're going to talk about morals, meanings, messages here in just a second, see whether that can maybe help elevate this. Do we get something out of it? I think this episode is better than good. It's better than just barely a passing grade, partly because of the ambition behind it, partly because, look, they delivered some good action scenes too. And I think if we're just looking at, like, character moments and do we get earned moments, I got to say that, like, with Lon Suter, very much some earned moments out of him with a guy we've only met once before. So those things elevate this episode. And where I understand that you're kind of sitting there in the middle on this one, it's like grudgingly, well, it has to hold up because it has to be part of this overall storyline. I think I take it like just a point further and go like, yeah, it does those things, but we can also get a little bit more out of it too. Speaking of getting more out of it, what about those morals, meanings, messages?
Well, there's a famous quote that most Star Trek fans know. This comes from Scotty from Star Trek 3. After he sabotaged the Excelsior, he said, "The more they overthink the plumbing, the easier it is to stop up the drain." So where am I going with this? So there's, when you play the home game, there's something that John and I do, and it's also the title game. And you're wondering why that they titled both of these episodes like Basics Part 1 and 2. Maybe the moral of the story, at least from what I got, maybe the moral is not to be so reliant on technology and remember how to think and act for yourselves. Voyager is the series so far of technobabble, and you hear a lot of the characters rely on tricorder this or sensor that, or make sure that all of these technological feats allow us to be able to do what we need to do. Now, I understand that they're on a starship. I understand they're in the Delta Quadrant. I understand that they need this technology to survive. But at the same time, though, you don't need it in order to communicate and connect with other people. You don't need that to make sure that you maintain relationships with your fellow officers, because if you look at it from a real world standpoint, how many times have, say, John, you or I or anyone out there listening to this or in the sound of our voices have stood in line for anything, for a concert or to get into a restaurant or to get into a movie or to get your car from a valet, and everyone is staring at a screen. Nobody is talking to each other, not even in the passage of time that it takes just to do a 1 to 2 minute chore or act or, get your groceries or get to your car or wait for something. Maybe that's, and I know that that's not necessarily the point of Basics maybe back in 1996 when none of this existed, but I'm watching it from the context of where I am now. And maybe this is the disconnect with what happens with too much technology. Too much dependence of technology on technology prevents us from thinking for ourselves. I mean, think about, again, today, most of us are very dependent on what our technology allows us to achieve. Knowledge, like instant gratification, communications. This is something that Cullen actually revered about technology. And he actually, he blamed Janeway for squandering and not sharing. He even said to her, this is what happens when you don't share technology with other species, especially us. But is that necessarily a good or a bad thing? I mean, think about what we do. As soon as we can't figure out something, we go to our phone or we go to our watch, or we go to our computer, hit Google, and it tells us exactly what we need to know. We don't even retain it. We just need to know it for that specific reason, to either remember something that we should have and exercise our memory, or to defeat somebody in an argument or go online and have an incredibly ridiculous amount of single-sided discourse, right? All of this is because we're dependent on technology. So it was funny watching the crew not do basic things like start a fire, talk to each other, figure out basic human problem solving, because what happens when you're too dependent on technology in order to do just that, just to do the basic, simple things that humans are supposed to do? That's kind of what
Well, I think if I had to sum it up, I think what you're saying is that the problem is plain to see. Too much technology, machines to save our lives, machines dehumanize.
I bring up 30-year-old commercial references. John brings the knowledge. He brings the noise, the music, the lyrics. Yeah,
that's what I brought.
So, but that's kind of what I get out of it. You just can't lean on it too much. Obviously, there's a happy medium between all of this. But when in the industrial age, when it changed everything, you still need to know how to shoe a horse. You still need to know how to change an oil filter. You still need to know how to pump gas. You still need to know how to write in cursive. None of these things actually apply anymore, right? But when they do, what do you do?
Right. Yeah, I think definitely going from the title, that theme is absolutely there. The other thing that I touched on a bit in the earlier part of our discussion here is I feel like there's this great through line in this episode about redemption and second chances. And when it hits really well in this. We get to see that play out with the crew on Head-on 4 dealing with the indigenous people there, and that decision to, we can prepare, we can have weapons, we can protect ourselves in that way, but we also have to make a decision to not rely on that. We have to make a decision that we're going to coexist peacefully. and go to great lengths to make that known to those people. I think that was really nice to see. There's an opportunity of circumstance as well. And, the innocent in all of this is that baby, whether he was Chakotay's or not, as we learn later on. That's the one who has the opportunity to not grow up in that terrible environment led by the late Seska and now by Maj Kala. And who knows what will happen to that baby in the future. Imagine what would have happened if the baby had survived and stayed on Voyager instead. Could have been a whole different outcome there. But really, I think the most fascinating story here is Suitors. I think dramatically his story plays out beautifully, but I think also it shows that given, again, the right environment, the right encouragement, and the right resources, that nobody is too far beyond redemption. And it took somebody thoughtful and caring like Tuvok to give him those resources and to help. It would have been a very different show had Lon Suitor lived, and we try to revisit him episodes to come for the next however many years. I think they made the right decision for the script in this episode. And seeing that kind of redemption story play out in an episode like this, I think elevated the dramatic heights and also elevated the thematic heights of what we can take out of it.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you would like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Flashback.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Adam Brusky, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, John Mann, Mike Richards, and Mike Schabel. That was basics, that's it. I say next time, we go with Fortran instead. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.